thank you everyone so much for tuning in and for joining us for that film screening of Within the Water. Also, in case you missed the first few minutes of the event, or if you're rewatching this, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the link in our chat, and I'll also leave this in the video description as well. So you can find it later on Water Bear's website. But yes, thank you so much for tuning in. And I guess quickly just to introduce myself, my name is Leah Tanner, and I'm part of Oceanic Global, along with Cassia Patel. And we're just incredibly excited to be having this discussion as part of our larger ocean wellness campaign. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Oceanic Global, we just launched a year-long campaign called Ocean and Wellness, which really highlights how internal healing and planetary healing go hand in hand to reiterate really the need to rebalance our relationships with ourselves and also with the natural world. And so through this Ocean and Wellness series, we'll be addressing things like climate anxiety and burnout within the environmental movement, also highlighting the healing properties of the water and the ocean, which really this film perfectly encapsulates. And then also we're going to be helping our community harness these benefits into their own mindfulness practices for collective healing and a journey towards that collective healing. And so, yeah, when we came across this film, it just made so much sense to us to host a film screening to really unpack together how water in the ocean can be used as a healing modality for prenatal, postnatal, depression, and beyond. And, you know, especially with this event falling in May, which is the month of Mother's Day, we just felt that it was a beautiful alignment. So yes, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and a special thank you to all of our speakers who are joining us today. And I'd love to just go around and introduce ourselves, if that works. So I guess starting with Cassia, if you could just quickly share a little bit about yourself and then your work with OG.
Thank you, Leah, and thanks again, everyone, for being here. I'll be very quick and just note, my name is Cassia. I'm the Director of Programs at Oceanic Global. And from a housekeeping perspective, this is a Zoom webinar. So those in the audience can put questions in through the Q&A and the chat as the conversation unfolds. Please, as you have a question in your mind, throw it in there. We will give our speakers a chance to really share their stories and thoughts first, and then we will be bringing those audience questions out at the end. But throw those questions in as you go, and just know that we'll be coming back to them at the end. And really excited to be here, as Leah mentioned, as we're recently kicked off our Ocean Wellness campaign. So this fits beautifully. And actually, I'm going to pass it off to Sarah, who is a chair of our New York City Hub community, who we had initially approached about this event, and she has a special connection to this theme.
Yes, I am Sarah Michler. It's so wonderful to meet all of you. I work as an environmental educator and film producer. And I almost a year to this day, on Saturday, I had a daughter. And I can't believe she's one. Her name is Beatrice. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the ocean and water was essential to my pregnancy, my birth in many ways, and now the raising of my daughter. So this is a really dear topic and such a powerful film to discuss.
Beautiful. All right, Eleanor.
Hi, yeah, my name is Eleanor Church, and this is Koall. We're the directors of the film that you've just seen, and I personally have been a filmmaker for nearly 20 years now, working on films that tell stories about humans in the environment, and that's a big passion of mine.
Hi everyone, I'm Kat, and I'm an illustrator, an animator, and filmmaker, and I'm also the Dean of Med Film School here in London and Berlin Leeds. And yeah, one of the co-directors of Within the Water, and a neighbor and friend of Eleanor. And between us, we have 8 children.
So amazing. And I also didn't realize until seeing your faces that you're in the film yourself, which is amazing. But I think actually I'd love to start with some questions for you both.
Wait, Leah, I just want to jump in really fast because Hannah, my doula, who is supposed to be here tonight, she just texted me. She's with a client, but the baby was just born. So she thinks she can jump in from the hospital in 15 minutes. So we'll see her hopefully in 15 minutes.
Okay.
So beautiful and fitting for this conversation.
Oh, well, tell her that she doesn't need to stress to join, but that's beautiful. But yes, okay, so I think the biggest question on my mind is really what inspired you both to create this film and to be part of it, really.
Well, I guess as we both said, we're visual storytellers and always have been, and I guess we both went through. We both have numerous children, and but in our last pregnancies, we both went through prenatal depression and had a very different experience that we'd had in our other pregnancies, and I guess personally, I've been using film as a campaigning tool for most of my working life. And so when this was happening, and when I experienced it, I knew that Kat had experienced it before, and it was just a strange coincidence that it had happened to both of us because we hadn't known anyone else who had experienced prenatal depression before. And it was such an extreme emotion and situation that was the sea and our swimming ritual was really useful to us, well, very important to us, and that it felt like making a film was the only way that we could possibly process what happened, but also we felt like it was something that was difficult to talk to people about, sometimes person to person, but we knew that other people would have experienced it as well. And so we thought it was an important thing to do. And that was why we decided to make the film, which is actually quite scary because, like you say, we were in it, and it's the most personal piece of work that we've ever done, and frightening to expose yourself sometimes, but we thought it was really worth it because something that needs to be spoken about.
I think that anyone who's ever experienced prenatal depression, even if they did even if they were lucky enough to get help quite quickly, have felt this intense isolation, even if it was just for a few minutes. There's something so incredibly alienating about a feeling that is about your own body and the baby that you're growing. And because pregnancy is such a visual thing and everyone responds to it in such an open, direct way, and most people will be very positive and say things to you, and it's that sort of alienation that you feel that can be so guilt-inducing and as I said, isolating, that we felt conversation was really incredibly important as a tool to survive in the first instance. So for me, when I was going through it, it was instinctual despair that led me to open up to Eleanor and talk about what I was going through, because I knew it was either that or something quite radical and drastically negative. So I felt pushed to that, but then it was such a positive experience to just simply talk about it and share the experience, and it felt empowering, and it turned the whole experience into something positive to an extent. And so I guess the film was meant to continue that conversation and to sort of extend the circle of people that were talking. I think that it sounds so simple, but it can feel unsurmountable when you're going through this experience to talk about it. And we felt that the film could be part of maybe a solution for some people, or to at least kind of feel a sense of hope that there was something that could get them through it if they could just share.
Yeah, and to know that other people are going through it as well. You mentioned feeling isolated and alone, and I know that there can be a lot of stigma around this, and so I think the film is a beautiful way of combating that. I'm curious, what the reaction of the film has been. If you've heard positive stories of it helping anyone, or just even personally being featured in it.
I think that yes. So I think the response has been overwhelming for both of us. From really a whole mix and range of people. So there's the people that have been immediately affected by this and feel, so they're reaching out just to say that they're thankful that, and it is really scary. Even sitting here is quite, and it's the neither of us, yes, neither of us is really used to sharing such personal things, but it's been encouraging to see how many people respond and feel strong enough to do that and say, and say that it's helped them in some way. It's also interesting to see, in general, pregnant people responding, even people that haven't necessarily gone through this, because there's this conversation about, shifting the focus maybe away from the unborn baby to the human being that's growing that baby, and sort of that sort of shift in, it's a paradigm shift, isn't it, to think of the human not just as the vessel, but we are really struggling if we're going through something like that, and we need the attention and the care and the focus.
Someone asking the questions of how you are as well. And I think also it's been interesting speaking to people who are the partners or the friends of people who are pregnant to say, maybe we'll listen more, or we'll be open more to hearing what people are actually saying. I personally, without wanting to discount, the great support of friends and family and things like that, I felt like I was saying I'm struggling. And there was lots of things I've always said all along in different situations, oh, you'll be okay, everything will be fine, oh, isn't this nice, blah, blah, blah. But actually really listening and actually letting people speak about how things are. But then also we, when we were researching the film, we drew on midwives and healthcare workers and doulas and things like that. And we know that a number of healthcare workers and midwives have used the film in training to open the conversation about how you might actually change the way that you talk to people when they're pregnant, and ask different questions, or maybe be more aware of what's happening. So it's been a really positive response to it, and I think as Kat said, it is exposing and quite frightening for us, but actually we've only had kind responses, but also more than that, really positive, that it's been helpful and that people are more able to talk about this thing, like you say, that there is a real stigma around that you're meant to just be delighted that you're pregnant, but actually pregnancy brings an enormous spectrum of emotions, and you feel different from minute to minute, from hour to hour, to day, and it's okay to feel all those things, and it doesn't make you a bad person or a bad parent to be. That it's just a reality. You're changing, your life is changing, you're changing, everything's changing. So yeah, good response.
Yeah, amazing. Well, that's great to hear. And I guess, as we've been doing this whole ocean wellness campaign and learning a little bit more about how water can actually help heal, I'm curious, if you could explain a little bit more about the psychological impact of cold water swimming, or why that really does help. If you could share any insight there. I also pulled some notes too that I can share as well.
So I think, first of all, it's important to state that we came to cold water swimming or wild swimming almost intuitively. So we didn't, I certainly didn't do any research around it or look into the kind of scientific reasons behind it. I just knew I wanted to do it and I needed to do it. And there's something about when your nervous system is in this fight or flight mode, when you're feeling depressed and really at your wit's end, and you jump into ice cold water, there's this reset that happens. Your heart starts racing, and there's a shift in your body, quite physical shift, that just takes your attention away from the darkness. And I think in addition to that, there's something about when it's so cold and you're in the wild and it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you're with your friend, you just start giggling and you just start feeling a bit silly. You're kind of tumbling into the cold water and your mind just goes blank a bit. So it is, you know, as I compare in the film, it is a bit like meditation. Your mind just draws a blank and you just focus on the physical aspects of, I'm cold, I need to swim, this is fun, I don't know why, but it's somehow good for me. And then you look around and you see beautiful nature around you and the waves and the trees that have been there for millions of years. It's quite humbling. You know, in a quite simplistic way, it just reminds you that the world keeps spinning. Even if you're having a really tough time right now, it will be okay. And for us, and again, this is very personal, but I think there was something about the ritual around it. So we usually went really early in the morning before our families woke up.
In the dark.
In the cold, there's something about sort of stealing away and claiming that space. And then looking forward to the glorious coffee afterwards, where you just sit on the beach in quiet. We weren't really necessarily talking about anything specific, but just looking at the scenery. And without really putting it into words, it just, for me, it was a survival mechanism. And it became something I looked forward to, that gave me a purpose, and made me feel better, quite simply.
Yeah, and I would completely, reiterate everything that Kat said. And also, I've grown up swimming in water all my life. Every time I see any kind of water, I just want to jump into it. And it felt like a very natural place to go when I was feeling bad. And even now, when I feel stressed or something like that, if I go for a swim in the sea, we live in a place where the sea is quite cold most of the year. We have maybe 2 months when it's not absolutely freezing, which isn't the case for many of you, I imagine. But that it is really that shock, that sort of like, whoa, and that's all you can think about right then. And then you come out and you dive under and you come out and you're like, I feel reborn, without being evangelical about it. It really feels like that. And then you come away and you're like reset for the week, or you're reset for that moment. And that's where it is.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think so. I would love to read a few little facts on. So we've been reading this book, Blue Mind, which I don't know if anyone has heard of it, but it's amazing. And I pulled out some little nuggets of information in here, but essentially there really is a lot of research to support that, you know, being near or in water can help with mental health by, you know, making us happier, producing feelings of wonder, relaxation, and renewal, and also just feeling a greater sense of connection with ourselves and with Mother Nature, which I love. But so the sounds of waves crashing can actually alter our mental wave patterns and induce a meditative state, which is really interesting. And that might be why, you know, you feel so calm, even just listening to waves crashing. Another fact is that the negative ions, which are created by waves crashing, actually increase our body's ability to absorb oxygen, and it helps to balance serotonin levels, which regulates mood and increases feelings of happiness and well-being. So that's probably why we all feel so energized and uplifted when we take a walk on the beach. And then due to its specific wavelengths, the color blue alone, which I think is so interesting, actually changes our brain wave frequency and puts us in a mild meditative state as well. So it can help us feel more calm and relaxed, but also energized as well. And then the last one that I'll share is that when in water, so when immersed in water and actually swimming in water, our body sends out a signal to adjust the balance of the hormone that regulates our body's stress response. So it can, again, help you feel much more calm and in a meditative state. So I think it's so interesting, the actual science. And, you know, we've all felt that. And, you know, when we're swimming, it's like, why are we feeling this way? And I just think it's so interesting. But Sarah, I'd actually love to pass it off to you. I know that you've been patiently waiting, but as a new mom yourself, which is so amazing, I'd really love to hear about your personal connection with the ocean and water, you know, throughout your life as an environmental educator, but also during your pregnancy journey as well.
Yeah. And I just love listening to all of you speak, and this film really was so well done, I thought. And I also just love how how you don't show the faces. I thought that was such an interesting thing throughout the film. As I'm thinking of it, I just wanted to say, because it makes it so universal and relatable, and I feel, yeah, it was just a beautiful film, really powerful. But I have always loved the ocean. I grew up near the ocean in Connecticut, and I actually learned to swim before I could walk, which I think was a little bit because I'm competitive and my older sister was swimming. And so I was determined to swim as well. But it's always been a huge part of me. I've been obsessed with whales, as everyone in Oceanic Global knows well at this point. I don't know why or how. Maybe I was a whale in a past life, I'd like to think, but I've always been obsessed with whales. And so it's just kind of been a theme throughout my life. And now I try to teach children about the ocean, and first and foremost to care about the ocean, because if they're to care for it, maybe they'll really want to protect it. And so when I was pregnant, and during my pregnancy, swimming was essential to me, even more so than when I wasn't pregnant, which was interesting to me. I mean, I always loved to swim, but it almost felt like this need I had. And luckily, during a lot of my pregnancy, I was working in Los Angeles. And so I had access to a pretty warm ocean, which was very lovely. But it was critical for my mental health. And I don't know if it was also the feeling of being buoyant and more connected to my daughter, because she wasn't floating in liquid essentially inside my belly. But when we were both floating in the water, I just felt this kind of transcendent experience every day. And it was so essential. I also felt, when you're in the water and you're buoyant, I felt like I was myself again and more light and like I was in my own body. And that was very critical as, my second and third trimester came around, because it's a bizarre feeling. You feel like you're an alien in your own body in a way, growing this human. And so when I was in the water, I felt like I was myself again, first of all, but also that I was connected to her in a deeper way. And then when I went into labor, and hopefully Hannah will be able to join at some point, because she was my doula, and we listened to whale noises a lot of my labor, and I found that it really calmed me. We watched whale imagery. We did 19 hours in my apartment here in New York of labor, and then at that point I had this huge hormone drop and we rushed to the hospital in a very dramatic scene out of a movie, with an Uber driver not knowing if I'm going to give birth in the Uber. My husband is totally useless at this point. But we made it to the hospital. And once we got there, I delivered within an hour. So we listened to whale noises a lot of that time in my apartment. And I also was drawn to the water. And so I took a lot of showers. It helped me deal with contractions. And water just has this calming part or something to me. Sorry, Hannah's texting that she's leaving the hospital, trying to join soon. So it was essential to me. And now a key thing I forgot to mention is my daughter is completely in love with the water, and she squeals with joy whenever we are in the water, in an ocean or in a pool. And she's never cried, which I find a little unusual for a baby when I put her in water. And I wonder if there's some connection to me swimming every day for most of my pregnancy, and feeling this deeper connection to her throughout that time. And it fills me with such pleasure that she experiences joy in the water. And it's allowing us, as now in this space where she's here in this world, to also connect in a deeper way, and to go swimming together and to go in the water together. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I think, a big part of our work at Oceanic, and Sarah's actually on our New York City hub chapter, but it's really about establishing that connection, and, you know, however that might be. And I think that's so amazing that you're starting that connection for her so early on in her age. But really, it's just, you know, feeling that, because when you care for the environment, then you want to protect it more deeply. And so it's this really beautiful thing where, you know, we can care for the planet, but in return, it will also care for us. So again, that's really something that we want to explore more throughout this year through the Ocean Wellness campaign. But I think it's also just, yeah, so amazing that this film really highlights that. And then through your own work, Sarah, and your own life, it's really been highlighted as well.
Yeah. And I have to say, postpartum, it was one of the biggest challenges was that my doctor told me I couldn't swim for the first 6 weeks, and I couldn't take a bath or anything. And that was very challenging emotionally for me. And just having that transition, because it's a transition that I really couldn't fathom until I went through it as a new mom. But to not be able to use water as a therapeutic tool during that time was particularly challenging. And I also, yeah, and so it just, I think it has such incredible healing powers, and that was challenging emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'd love to open it up to
Oh,
everyone.
Hannah just said she's on.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Oh, we're pulling her up right now. Welcome, Hannah. I'm glad you made it. And she should be rejoining in just a moment.
Yeah.
Hello.
Amazing.
Oh my God. Yay. This feels very perfectly topical to be here at the hospital where a baby was just born.
Wow.
Amazing.
I can't believe
So I'm a little, I know, I can't believe I made it either. I'm a little late to the party, but it's really good to be here. I'm actually in the same, I'm in the same hospital Sarah delivered in right now.
So amazing.
So cool.
I feel like that's beautiful energetically, and it's meant to be. That's so
It is. It's serendipity.
I was just talking a little bit about my labor with you, and using whale noises and water throughout my labor was huge for me. And I was just saying that post not being able to use water for the first 6 weeks was super challenging emotionally for me.
Yeah, especially being so connected to water in your prenatal journey, and then through birth, postpartum, having that absence of water. But I was so inspired, Sarah, by your kind of wanting to use even the sounds of water. Our imaginations during birth are so powerful. I think our imaginations in general are so powerful, but especially with birth, it can really affect how our body reacts. And part of my job is to make sure that that environment is to help facilitate that environment and then carry that environment with you to the hospital so that labor doesn't get interrupted in that way, and that kind of peaceful experience of water, also extremely powerful. Water is such a powerful force, and gravity, the tides, all of that pull of the ocean is something that, you know, we use gravity in birth to really help pull and you know, facilitate the baby coming out. So it's all connected. It's kind of wild once you start going down the rabbit hole of how everything works.
So true.
Yeah, Hannah.
I just did something. I was just going to say, it's so amazing when you see a baby, a really tiny baby in water, and how natural it feels to them. You feel like that you shouldn't do that or something, but they just feel completely at ease with it. And actually, in the pregnancy that I had that we made during the film, I was having twins, and with my previous children, I hadn't been swimming in the sea or in water for the 6 weeks that they recommended, but no one take any advice I'm saying, because I'm not a scientist or a doctor. But I did go swimming in the sea really soon after they were born, and I brought them with me, and they were just delighted by it, even though they were so small, and you feel like it's really alien taking them into seawater. You know, you take them into like a pool, maybe naturally, or in the bath or something like that, but they just absolutely loved it. And even now they're almost 2, and they see water on the horizon, and they're like shouting for it. They're just like, they love water, whether it's from the water butt or from the tap or in the bath or the sea, wherever. And I think it is just a really natural human thing that we are really connected to. And I think that's really amazing.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I think you're right on it. Babies are 90% water when they're newborns. So we are something like 60 or 70%, but babies are 90% water when they're born because they've been suspended in that amniotic fluid for so long. So it's very intuitive for them to be in water. And I think it's helpful for us to remind ourselves that that's where we began, you know, suspended in water, and that it can, you know, I think our modern world is so loud and noisy, and it can get distracting from intuition. It can be very confusing to like figure out our own animal instincts amongst the modern world. But I think truly water in ancient cultures and many cultures today, it's really used during labor and the postpartum to facilitate healing and also labor progressing. It's becoming, I'm sure, maybe you've already talked about this a little bit, more and more popular to use water during labor. It's an ancient tradition, which is really cool to kind of think about, that we've inherited.
I learned that from you, Hannah, that it goes back 8,000 years. It's so fascinating. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because the history is just incredible.
Yeah, there's some evidence about water birth in Crete. There was a temple formed for women to, I think this was like 2700 BC, where they formed a temple for women to give birth in water. It was like pools and hot springs where women would labor. And I'm curious about whether they used that at all postpartum, or kind of the Roman bath-esque type thing of did they use that for healing? But there's cultures that still in South America use this local river to go give birth in. There's like a special secret spot that people go give birth in. And I think this kind of film and this conversation has sparked a curiosity for me about whether people in these cultures are using it postpartum as well, and what the experiences are with water for healing postpartum. Certainly labor, I think it's definitely an ancient tradition. And then with modern medicine, it's kind of moved us away from some of those traditions and wisdoms. And so I'm very, part of my passion is how do we merge the two? How do we use modern medicine to our advantage without maybe having the harm that it can also bring and the trauma? My clients some of them experience PTSD and trauma from their birth experience in the hospital. And maybe that's why they hire me for their next birth, to try to have a more positive experience. And I think it shouldn't just be about healthy mom, healthy baby, like the minimum being that you're alive. That should be a given. Like we're, all working towards that. I think the thing that I'm passionate about is not just the health of being alive, but the quality of that and the quality of that experience, because it can really impact postpartum and your bonding with your baby. And it's just such an experience. And I think a little bit in America, the culture is like, you give birth, you get sent home if you're alive, and bye. And I think that does a disservice to the experience of having babies. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you actually, before we dive in too deep, Hannah, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself.
Oh my God.
Shared a little bit about you, but just for everyone watching. But then I'd also love to know, how you have used water in your work. And then, you mentioned, feelings of leaving and they just send them off and there's no really post care, but after you have a baby, have you dealt with that kind of trauma and healed it with water as well?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm Hannah Shealy. I'm a birth and postpartum doula, breastfeeding counselor, and childbirth educator. Sorry to just kind of jump in. It's been a wild 24 hours. But I absolutely, with my birth clients, recommend that everyone uses, we call it like hydrotherapy, water at some point during labor, whether that's a shower. Often clients will take showers. Sarah, I don't know if you want to hop in at all with that, but hot
took like
showers
8 showers during my labor.
Showers are incredible. The body just immediately relaxes. If I notice that a client might be struggling or like emotionally feeling charged, I'll just kind of try to be like, let's get in the shower. And as soon as that water hits your body, there's such a relax and a release and a feeling of safety, I think, and grounded energy. And certainly I've had a few clients like birth in water in tubs, which is an interesting thing. I think most success happens earlier in labor with that. And then some people get really claustrophobic in water in kind of when your body is like fully surrounded and you're close to pushing, it can feel very claustrophobic. But certainly at the same time, some people find it really much less pain. You have much less tearing. You can have much less tearing. It can just be a more holistic experience in a water. And for the baby, exactly like you were saying about the baby feeling at home there, babies often are very peaceful after water births. Just kind of, it's a gentle way for them to be brought to land, kind of the transition from the amniotic fluid into water, into air. So yeah, and I can't remember if your last question, postpartum. Absolutely. Postpartum is a little more with the medical side of like, they don't want you, in the ocean or da, 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 da. But I think that, I think water is always healing, and even water sounds or being close to a body of water, and even the air that comes off an ocean or off a body of water, I think is extremely healing. And I definitely encourage people to spend time near water, and depending on their medical circumstances, if they're cleared to be submerged, I think that can be extremely beautiful. And I'm so curious about, our filmmakers, your kind of, my question would be, how did you find that was healing for you? Did you already know that, or was it, was it an intuitive thing for you, or was it a kind of external knowledge?
Completely intuitive. Just drawn to it. We talked about this earlier a little bit, just because there wasn't much research out there around prenatal depression or how to deal with it, let alone, really anything else. I just love swimming in the wild because I love it personally, because it's free and you're not bound by opening hours. You can go whenever you want, and it's beautiful to look at. And that's why I always loved it. And then, as you said, it's so nice to be light. I think someone said this earlier, Sarah, maybe you said that. Just when you're feeling so heavy, to be floating is so lovely. I personally also had 4 water births, so I really, and I have to say, I'm not a very spiritual person. For me, it was a very pragmatic decision to do it for pain relief. But I also love this idea of having my space and not being touched. I really needed that kind of safety around me. One of my children was born with the sac intact, so he was floating in the bubble under the water. And anyway, I always loved giving birth in the water because it made sense to me. I don't know how people do it on land. It feels so strange to me, and much harder.
Yeah, and same. I think. Well, first of all, in terms of the water, my mum went into labour with me on the beach that we live quite nearby now, and she didn't give birth to me on the beach, but I've been swimming in that water and every water since, basically. But I think there's also something about the repetitive rhythm of the waves that we've talked about, and the cold water and the expanse and the birds and the smell and everything, and feeling like you're a tiny thing in this enormous world. And that's really important. I've had 1 water birth. My first birth was reasonably stressful and traumatic. The second one was at home in our living room in a water birth, and it was amazing. And my daughter didn't even cry. We knew that she was alive, but she didn't cry, and it was amazing. And with the twins, I had to have them in hospital because it seemed a complicated birth, but I got into a headspace. Again, I wouldn't sort of say that I was someone who was sort of naturally be like this, but I basically managed to get myself into this headspace where I was picturing this beach that I know very, very well, where my mum lives, and that in the hospital with 15 medical staff around me, in my head I was on this beach, and that was what I was picturing, and that's what got me through giving birth to 2 babies at the same time, pretty much. And yeah, and I think it's just it's where we're from, isn't it? And so it's an important thing, and it is that thing, like you say, it's that sort of superhuman human thing that we're so disconnected from. And actually Sarah and I both went on big sea trips, which is a whole other story, but I think that is the real sort of, for me, I sailed across the North Pacific for 3 weeks, and there, being in the middle of the ocean, it was there to do research on microplastics. That was a whole other thing, but it was really that rhythm of the world and the ocean and everything happening always, and us being small parts of it, that really is really grounding.
And I think it's really it's good how everyone's pointing out how there are ways to get to that point. So because I understand it can be a very privileged thing. You're lucky to have a water birth, or you know, you might not be in the position to have that, and that doesn't mean you can't get yourself into that headspace, or have a shower, or use your tap in the kitchen, or whatever means, you know, to get to water. I think that's important to point out, that it doesn't have to be that perfect scenario. Yeah. You can still,
and I think for us in our film, like you were saying, Sarah, we specifically didn't use people's faces, partly because we wanted it to be like a story that was talking to many people, and that we experienced swimming as an important thing, but other people had other things that kept them grounded and kept them in a good place. And so the idea that anything that is your thing that can work for you is really important. But also for us, we live in Essex, which has some beautiful wild beaches, but the one that we went to was opposite a disused power station, and so it has like wartime seawalls. It's not these beautiful, you know, Devonshire, Cornish beaches, you know, wild Atlantic things. It's an estuary beach. It's very rudimentary. And that was really important to us, to actually make people realize that you don't have to go to these incredible landscapes and these incredible parts of the world, that any kind of water that you can get into that's clean, obviously, that's hygienic, you know, that doesn't have some kind of environmental crisis going on, that can make you feel grounded. And that was a really important thing for us, and that we wanted to highlight.
I love everything that you just said. And Kat, I love that you mentioned access to water, because that's something that we talk a lot about actually as a hub with Oceanic Global in New York, because even though we're surrounded by water, you often forget it's very hard. It's not clean, and it's very hard to swim and to have access to water. But it's very important to me, as I've mentioned with my daughter growing up, to feel that connection to the water. And we go and look at it all the time, but then at night I play a sound machine of ocean noises, and it lulls her to sleep. And I found that since she was born, well, I think I'm kind of projecting here, but she tends to fall asleep to it, and still does. I'm like, you're gonna love the ocean, whether you like it or not. But I do think
bring back the whale sounds.
Yeah, totally. But I do think that access to water and to swimming is a big issue, but that there's ways to, as you said, visualize it and experience it in other ways, especially through art and film now. And I use that in my classrooms a lot, because you can experience it. It can transform your day just with a high level imagery and sounds and noises that we're able to experience.
That's amazing. Well, I want to be conscious of time, so I would love to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions. I think Cassia actually already jumped in with some notes in the chat, but yeah, feel free to add any questions in there for anyone speaking, or you raise your hand.
Rachel's has raised her hand, so I'm going to bring you up to ask your question, Rachel. And if you unmute, go for it.
Wonderful. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Beautiful.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much for this event. Beautiful film and just a really wonderful discussion. I guess listening to all this, I'm thinking, what can we do? What do you hope that we can do next? Like, because this is, I think, a newer topic for some people. It's really not super mainstream yet. So I guess, what are your hopes for next steps as this film is shared and as this discussion hopefully continues? What is needed to really get this into the mainstream and have this be something that is knowledge that is accessible to people, but also, is it resources or integration into, therapy? Just curious if you've had any thoughts on what are the next steps here?
That's a great question. And Hannah, maybe I would even turn to you because you have some amazing resources, but also just to talk about the stigma that comes with pre and postnatal depression, and how common it is. And I agree, Rachel, it's not in mainstream media or culture at all. And it should be talked about openly much more.
Yeah, definitely. That's an amazing question. I think part of the issue is exactly as Sarah was saying around the stigma, that there's a lot of kind of shame that mothers feel for feeling this way, that they've got this new baby, or that they're pregnant with a child on the way, and they're having these confusing feelings or thoughts. And I think that the feeling of that it's my fault is a big one that limits people from access to reaching out for help. And I think just really normalizing amongst the conversation that it's not your fault. 1 in 7 women experience postpartum depression. There's no one cause that we know of. It could be genetics, it could be a traumatic event, it could be hormones, it could be, who knows, XYZ. So just really, I think, spreading awareness and having that as part of the conversation, opening spaces for women to share their experiences. I think storytelling is a really powerful tool like this film. And, just really speaking to each other is, I think, another powerful way, both in the sense of I need help, and also in the sense of, hey, this isn't your fault. I'm here with you and there's help. And here are some ideas and here are some resources. But I think certainly, for me, it's having those conversations prenatally of, hey, this might happen to you. So that it's not just happening in the moment and you have that experience of shame and you don't seek help because of that. So really normalizing that prenatally. But I'd be interested in the filmmakers too, if they feel that there's what their ideas are there as well.
If I may, I agree with you 100%. I think for me, there's a discussion that starts from my personal experience around, I wish someone had said to me, this is okay, I've gone through the same thing, or I'm going through the same thing, and there are some options for you. I think that knowledge and being able to just research what could be out there. A lot of the information at the time, so this was about 4 years ago, so not that long ago, a lot of the information was sort of conflated with postnatal depression. There's a lot of information comparatively out there around postnatal depression. I, for example, wanted to know very simply what would happen if I took antidepressants, what would happen to my unborn baby, just a simple question. I couldn't find the answers. So I think that's sort of small scale what I would like you say, just having that conversation and being able to talk about things without feeling that guilt. I think there's also this huge, big topic in the background around just maternal sort of health and data around that, and the lack of research, and women's health and women's rights and human rights. I don't know if I want to bring up Roe v. Wade, but that kind of idea of just us as human beings, and again, this isn't just women, but trans women, being human beings that want to care for themselves and not just be vessels for someone else, and sort of that focus on the unborn baby can be very problematic, especially if you're feeling low anyway. And so it's sort of on that range for me. And if the film can start somewhere, and if it's on the, you know, the small scale, that would be wonderful. But if it could lead to more conversations that can bring policy change, I'm all for it.
And into the training of people who are working in those medical roles as well, because yeah, I think it should just be brought in early on in people's medical education that they're doing, but then also as the ongoing training happens to sort of make sure, because I had quite a different experience to Kat when I had a specialist twins doctor, because I was having twins, and I didn't get to see them because of COVID until I was about 5 months pregnant. But I was absolutely desperate to speak to someone about how I was feeling, because I felt like I couldn't vocalize it to anyone, because it felt like a very wrong emotion to have. I think, as I said in the film, it feels very wrong to be saying, I don't feel anything for these babies. I don't even know if I want them. And I went into that appointment and they said, how are you? And I said, I'm not okay. And they immediately reacted in the right way, saying like, that's okay, what can we do about this? We're really worried about you, and how can we help you? What do you need? And I felt like I was able to say what I needed. I needed to speak to someone. I wouldn't be able to ask for help, because when I was feeling really bad, I knew from past experiences with dips in stages when I've had problems with my mental health before, maybe I know that when I'm feeling really bad, I can't ask for help. I need someone to be checking in on me and things like that. And I think that that's something that if you haven't experienced that in the past, then you wouldn't know that that's what you needed. And these are all things that need to be brought into maternal care, really, that there needs to be this real awareness that when someone's saying maybe they're okay, like actually to pry a bit more to check that they really are okay.
Yeah, and completely. And this just to point out again, as we say in the film, we are the privileged ones. We're actually the lucky ones that can get that information. What about all those voices that have far less, and like the voice in the film that's saying, I didn't want to be that angry Black woman pushing for more information. And there's so much more we need to do around this and bring to the fore. So it feels like a small start. Absolutely. But at least it's something.
Yeah, because not only are we in positions where we have had a lucky life, privileged life, and all these sorts of things, and we understand ourselves better maybe, but we also had babies before. If it's your first baby, then I know that when I had my first daughter, even going into the birth, the reason why it was quite traumatic possibly is because I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know what I could ask for, and I didn't know what was normal. And I think you need guidance basically and support.
And I love what both of you are saying, and Eleanor, especially thinking about how this can be broadened as a conversation too. So it's also even just thinking more comprehensively about mental health and the conversation around mental health. And that's where Ocean Wellness stemmed from. And not to put you on the spot, Rachel, but I happen to know that Rachel is active and an expert in the mental health sphere as well. So, as we're thinking about how to almost flip your question towards you, as we're thinking about how do we really change systems, how do we get rid of stigma around these conversations so we can talk about our mental health and not feel like we are the problem, that it's something wrong with us. And also to your point, Kat, that this is something that's even more felt in communities of color where there are fewer resources and access for help and support. And so how as a global society and community can we really shift that conversation? And Rachel, I'm just curious if there's anything you've seen from the overarching mental health conversation with youth or in other aspects of your work that you feel may be relevant to share here.
Yeah, there's so many, I think when we talk about mental health, there are so many different pieces that fit, and it's also very individualized is what I'm finding. And, I'm going into a master's program that specifically looks at psychology through the lens of philosophy. So existentialism and phenomenology. So really not labeling people, kind of taking each individual for what they're experiencing in the moment and not expecting, and labels do help. It's not like, does help. And I in the film, like having that answer, having, okay, this is something that is known, that's happening to me, it's happened to other people. That's so important. And being able to talk about that openly. But, you can sometimes get lost in just getting stuck with that label. And then suddenly, you're in which, a lot of therapists do, will then be like, okay, well, now you're a textbook example of having postpartum depression. So we're going to, send you down the path we send everybody down. And that might not work for everyone. And so that's why I was so intrigued by this conversation and really, utilizing water as that healing tool. And again, that might not work for everyone. I know personally people that don't feel comfortable, they don't feel that same serenity and just comfort around water that, to me, I don't quite understand, again, because we are, creatures of water and it is something I think we're innately connected to, but it's not for everyone. So, I think it's having that toolbox ready, and not assuming exactly what that person's going to need to get them to the end of their journey, but holding their hand through the process and having different things to offer and different suggestions and ways to also allow them to kind of discover what it is that works for them. And I think that's been really beautifully said in this call, is just the intuitive nature of being your own healer, and really seeing myself as more of a guide in that process. But it's the stigma is tough, and it's not going to be an overnight change. But I feel like, in Cassia, you mentioned with the youth, the hope in that younger generations feel less shame in discussing their mental health. And so I think encouraging them to continue having these hard conversations and feeling like they can discuss this openly with friends, with family, and even with colleagues. That's something I think in the workplace we need to be much more open about, because it impacts your day to day. And sometimes it's unexpected if you're going to, be hit with something mentally. So no, it all kind of fits, I think, in this bigger picture of how do we treat human wellness holistically, and what are all of the tools we have at our disposal. Creativity and art and dance and all these other things that might unlock it, that healing journey for someone. And so, yeah, thank you again so much for this event here. I think it's given me some great new ideas, and hopefully we can all continue this conversation.
Can I just jump in there quickly, just following on from what you said, because I think that's really interesting. I've been working recently with an organization that promotes social prescribing within our healthcare system. And I don't know if you know what social prescribing is, but basically we have a healthcare system where you can go free at point of use to your general practitioner, your general doctor, and 1 in 5 of the appointments that they have at the moment are for things that aren't related to medical problems, and it's to do with social problems. So it might be isolation, it might be financial problems, it might be anxiety or other things like that, that basically that the GP can't solve through medication or whatever else they might do. And so they prescribe these alternative activities. And I think that really talks to what you're saying, is that we don't need to medicalize things, but it's being brought within our, which is unusual because our government is really not radical at the moment, but quite narrow-minded. But it seems to be happening, and it's really amazing. So people might be prescribed 8 sessions of like a walking group or a singing group or a swimming group or something like that, and they're actually prescribed these sessions. And that's a way of tackling things without medicalizing things, and that's very much what our film sort of reflects as well, the idea that someone goes boxing, someone goes walking, someone goes swimming, and it's the idea that you don't have to have medication, you don't have to be given a label, as you say, to be sort of sent down this path. Actually, sometimes it's very human things that you need a human response to what you're experiencing rather than a medical response. Sometimes, but sometimes people need medical response.
I love the perception of community, essentially.
And I'm sorry, also just to say, I think you've made some really beautiful and pertinent points, Rachel, and you too, Eleanor, that just to look back, that of course, this isn't a case of if you're going through this, of you then finding the resilience within you and finding those things automatically, there is cases where you just haven't got the strength and the ability to think that far and even consider going for a walk or going for that swim. So I think going back to that really needed conversation and sharing of what you're going through and being able to do that is really the most important thing, I think, because we have this sort of toxic positivity movement, at least here in the UK. I don't know what it's like in the US, of we're just pulling through. It doesn't matter what the government is doing at the moment. You just have to have a positive mindset, etc. I don't want to get too political, but I think there's something to be said about actually being able to reach out for help and being vulnerable and saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know if it's swimming or walking or boxing.
Yeah.
Help. And I think, yeah, that's I guess what we were hoping to trigger. Yeah. I could easily continue ranting about all the things that are wrong.
Well, that's an amazing reflection. And thank you so much, Rachel, again, for sharing that very tangibly. Does anyone else have questions? This conversation has been incredible. I think everyone could continue to go on and share so many more stories.
Yeah, it's hard to, because I think exactly as you were saying, it's such a, it's so many layers, right? It goes on and on and on. And while everyone was talking, I was really thinking about how it is such about control. And I think there's a real business around birth business, that makes a lot of money, especially in America, where we've got a lot of lawsuits and legal issues that really impact policy. And that is trying to control women and birthing people's bodies and take away autonomy and take away intuition. And I notice, when I'm in a real kind of medical environment, if I mention something more intuitive, like even movement or water or any of that, it's almost a roll of the eyes, because there's not maybe a study to prove the but part of being alive is we don't have answers for everything, and there is mysticism, and we need to make space for that, both with prenatal and birth and postpartum. But I think it speaks to this deeper kind of insidious toxicity around wanting to control women and birthing people. And I think until we can really dismantle that, we will have these repercussions. And I think that's where community really is such a powerful tool.
Amazing. Well, are there any other questions? I don't know if you see any on your end, Cassia.
I don't see any, but yeah, thank you all for calling that out. Just the systemic issues that are very present and that do need to be addressed as a part of this larger conversation. I really love the prescription of community. I think that's amazing. And I'm very impressed by the UK government, I have to say. That's amazing. Everyone should take a look at that.
I could be wrong, but I do also think the Canadian government now is prescribing time in nature. Amazing. Yeah.
Love it.
It just speaks to the power of, the healing powers of nature and the ocean, which is really amazing.
America is limping behind, but hopefully we can.
I can't let that sit there. I have to say that happened despite the government, not thanks to the government.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but
I misunderstood.
It's not the government. They probably thought, wow, this is going to save us some money.
Got it.
But you're right. It's quite an amazing institution, yes, the NHS.
But common sense as well. So
yeah.
So yeah.
Not to discredit your point. Yes.
Good to clarify, though. It's helpful.
Hannah, I know that you've had a stressful time, so if you wanted to, we can hand it off to Cassia as well to close it off. But I wanted to open it to you just in case you wanted to.
Well, I will say my phone is at 1% because I've just been on the go. So if I suddenly disappear, that is maybe I should just hand it off to Cassia, because I'm worried that this is going to die halfway through, which would be a bit jarring. But it's been such a joy and pleasure to be here with you all, and such a real button to the birth experience I just had. And I hope this postpartum experience for this new mother is a really positive one. And there'll be definitely conversations I'm going to bring from this conversation to her. So there's a ripple effect already.
Amazing.
All right, Cassie, I'll hand it off to you to kind of close the evening off with a grounding breathwork or meditation, really as a tangible way to take some of these healing benefits of the ocean into our daily life, even if you live in a landlocked area. So.
Amazing. Well, yeah, and thank you all so much for joining. And Hannah, thank you for bringing the fresh energy of birth with you as you popped right into this call. It's incredible. And I'll really try to do you and our community justice here, and in leading some breath work and visualization. If people feel comfortable, I'm going to turn my video off. Feel free to turn your videos off so you can really just get into a comfortable place. And for those of our community who do have to jump early, thank you again for being here. So just find yourself in a comfortable stance, whether that's standing or sitting, but really just find alignment, sinking your hips down, feeling your spine stack straight up all the way through the crown of your head, and relaxing into an elongated spine, opening up this channel and connection. Imagining a cord coming straight through your spine, through Mother Earth, through the core, out the other end, and actually pulling as a silver thread or a white thread or a rainbow light, whatever speaks to you, out through the top of your crown, pulling your head towards the sky, the heavens, the clouds. And take a deep breath in through your nose, and feeling that inhale expand your belly the way that babies breathe. And release through your mouth or your nose, whatever feels comfortable. And take another deep breath in through your nose, deep into your belly, feeling that expand. Giving gratitude to the ocean, our mother source of life, for that second breath of air. More than half the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. So feeling connected, even if we are in a landlocked area, even if we are in a city, even if we are in a building. And just let the muscles of your face relax. And now, as we've been speaking about water and the healing potential, visualize a place that's really has meaning to you and is a place of solitude, a sanctuary, a healing place, to draw upon some of the words used to describe the ocean at the beginning of our session today, whether that is a beach or an ocean, or if that is a lake or a river or a pool, even your bathtub, wherever that safe water place might be for you. Just bring yourself there in your mind right now. And feel yourself slowly floating on the surface, hearing the waves around you, or feeling the movement of the water, moving, caressing, holding your body. If you're in a place that has waves, really listen to that sound. Let those waves symbolize your busy mind, your thoughts, your to-do list, the things you've been focusing on either before, during, or after this meeting. Let those waves wash over, and feel yourself sink below those waves if that feels comfortable and safe. Releasing and letting that tension stay at the surface, and letting yourself sink into this deep, quiet, womb-like place. If you're in the ocean, feel yourself surrounded by the heartbeat of our planet, of our interconnected, shared blue planet. Keep breathing deeply through your nose into your belly. Just feel the safety and the warmth and the love the expansiveness of this water body, of the ocean, of your own water body. Whether an infant at 90% water or an adult at 60% water, we are water beings. And feel and hold the expansiveness and depth of the ocean, of the water that you're in, and see that reflected in the depth and expansiveness you hold in yourself. Endless love and compassion, boundless strength, deep heart-centered energy and love. And feel that expansiveness break down the barrier between your body and the water. Just feeling in a state of oneness. Let yourself feel that peace, that continuity, the luminosity or expansiveness. Give yourself a few moments there at your own pace, at your own breath. If movement or relaxing muscles feels good, roll your head back, really sink in and feel that openness, the slight movement of the water. And slowly wiggle fingers and toes, or your hips and your spine as you come back into your body. Come back into this body that holds water. Into this body that holds life. Feel yourself slowly rising back to the surface if you're below. And as you break through the surface, hold with you that expansiveness, that depth, that endless love and compassion, that feeling of being in and with the heartbeat and loving universe that we're in. See and honor your strength and part of that, and feel the strength of all of the other people and women and men on this call, and feel strong in knowing that we are in community. And as you come back from floating on that water to just rising above, floating into the air, and gently coasting back into the room, standing or sitting, the furniture, the place, the people, the plants, the room that you're in. Just come back to the present moment. Humans are called amniotes as a type of animal because we do hold water within us. We've held and bring that water from our primordial ocean origins, as well as from the womb and the birth that we came from. So slowly open your eyes, blink them open, and take in the place that you're in. And can come back to our room here whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Cassia. I'm always blown away by how well you lead those. Thank you so much.
I hope that was supportive. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And like you said, you know, over 50% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. And so we like to think of breathwork as a way of, you know, really harnessing those healing properties of the ocean into our daily life. And I know our team has found it really helpful. We now start all of our team meetings off with a little bit of a breathwork meditation practice. And yeah, it's just a simple way to really calm ourselves down and reap the benefits of the ocean. So thank you, Cassia. That was really beautiful. Thank you to everyone on this call and for everyone who tuned in. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us or to watch. So thank you so much.